Now, without any further delay, coming to tonight's session on 5-point enterprise integration framework for product management. Let me give an introduction to our distinguished and eminent speaker of tonight, Satnam Singh. Satnam is commercially minded, execution-focused product leader who has created significant value for companies such as MetLife, Capital One, AT&T, and Travelocity through product management, data and analytics, and technology. He delivered data and analytics and digital transformation. Satnam currently serves as the VP of Product Management Analytics at Oracle. Previously, he has served as the Chief Data and Analytics Officer and Product Leader for companies such as MetLife and Travelocity, and a Senior Leader at Omnicom Group, world's largest advertising agency, and Razorfish. Satnam is a graduate of the prestigious Indian Institute of Technology and Columbia Business School, and currently resides in New Jersey, USA. A very warm welcome to you, Satnam. We are thrilled to have you here with us tonight. Handing the session over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Shema. Hopefully you can hear me and see me okay.
Yes.
Perfect. So Shema, I can go ahead and share my screen once. I believe, give me 1 second here. Thanks again for having me here. So let me see if I can, there we go. Give me a second here. Just gotta align my, okay, can you see my screen as well?
Yep.
Perfect, perfect. Well, thanks again for inviting me. It's my pleasure to join this session and present what I have learned over the course of the years with the group here. Couple of things to just start off with, of course, as Shema mentioned, but not saying here. I have put my LinkedIn out there. If you guys want to follow, if you want to connect with me, please do reach out. Just a little bit about me to start off with, as some of these Shema already mentioned. I have a background in product management, about 20+ years in product management, especially around data and analytics and digital transformation. I've cut my teeth at companies such as Oracle, where I am currently, Omnicom Group, where I established the entire product portfolio, if you will, around advertising analytics. Travelocity, where which was under private equity, TPG and Silver Lake, and we transformed the company and eventually ended up selling it to Expedia, and then MetLife as well. On an academic perspective, again, as Shema mentioned, I've been fortunate enough to be a part of programs at IIT Roorkee, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where I did my master's in operations research, which is advanced mathematical modeling, as well as recently at Columbia Business School. Now, as Shema and I connected, and she asked me what was the one topic that I really thought about in terms of sharing my insights, I realized that there's one consistent theme that I have observed over the years, and this is getting better, but I still see this being an area where there needs to be a significant focus, is around product managers integrating within the enterprise, right? The appropriate integration points within the enterprise, not just purely from thinking from a product perspective or an engineering perspective, but how do product managers, or how should product managers really connect across the enterprise, if you will, for to drive the maximum impact. But before we jump in there's some good stuff there, but before we jump in there, a couple of things to highlight. First of all, these views that I'm expressing today, the framework that I'm expressing today is my own. It's a sum of my experiences over the course of my career. It's not related to one specific company. It's not affiliated with one specific company. In the slides that I'll share with you today, I have purposefully kept them broad. And the idea is I wanted to make sure that everybody was able to walk away with some benefit, with some insight from the presentation today. So you will see that this is a bit broad. I certainly believe that each one of us has a separate, if you will, context where we are coming from. So as such, I do not believe there is one size fits all. So you will see again during the course of my talk today that while there is some prescriptive guidance that I will share. I'm not going to give you a magic bullet today, or a silver bullet today. I'm not going to give you that. That should not be the reason why you are here. Each one of you can benefit from what I have learned. I do not claim to be the smartest person in the room, but each one of you can hopefully take benefit from what I have learned over the course of my career and internalize for your specific situation or your context. One of the aspects that, especially in webinars, that I want to make sure that people can get from is this balance between being verbose on my slides, a lot of text on my slides, versus being very concise and delivering sound bites. What you will see today is I've actually skewed more towards a former, being a little bit verbose. The reason I did that is to make sure that the audience can get some specific text, if you will, or specific insights, if you will, from the discussion today. So you will see slides might seem a little text heavy to you, but again, remember, the idea here is that you can take this, there's a leaf behind, you can take this, and you're not just focused on, scribbling down as I'm talking, but the idea is you can simply focus on the discussion. And finally, as I said, this is going to be a broad-based presentation. The Q&A is where we're going to go into the specificity. So with that said, why the need? Anytime someone presents a framework to me, the first question I ask is, why? Like, why should there be a new framework, or why should there be a framework? Frameworks are born out of a need, if you will, a need such that you see again and again, and you want to apply a systematic approach. You want to develop a systematic approach that you can apply to that particular problem or to the particular set of issues that you see, such that it becomes, it allows you an easy way, a known methodology that you can trust, that you can rely on, and that is methodical to get you to the answer that you need. So what were the kind of the key issues that I have seen over the course of my career with regards to the product management integration into the organization, which made me think about develop this enterprise integration framework? First of all, I saw that the organizations, as well as, to be honest, mea culpa, sometimes product managers also have a very myopic view of product. We think about product only in reference to customers and technology. And that's important, but it's not the end of it. We need to think through the commercial lens of it. We need to think through the strategic lens of it. We need to think through the sales lens of it. And that's important for the organization, very important for the organization and the product teams. We're often driven, as organizations sometimes, we're often driven by shipping velocity only, how fast we can ship, how fast we can get the features out there. And while, again, that is important, this drive for shipping velocity leaves something big on the table, which is the focus on driving adoption and customer satisfaction. Well, you need to make sure that you have the shipping velocity, but also you need to make sure that you are focusing on the adoption as well. Often we are focused on the short term, next release or the next two releases. That's where we have the high fidelity. And from an agile perspective, that's the right way to go about it. But make sure that we're not missing the forest for the trees. We're not simply looking at the next two releases, thinking purely from an agile process perspective, but we completely miss out on delivering a clear vision to the market. We need to make sure that while we are focused on an operational execution perspective, we're also continuously working with the market to drive a clear vision. Code complete being equal to success. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that a release is marked as complete as soon as it's code complete. Great, we're done, and nothing can be further than the truth, especially in the cloud world. Maybe it was true, 10 years back, where you said, look, I'm code complete, I can go ahead and ship, maybe. But in the world where consumption is the name of the game, it's no longer just pure licensing sales. Consumption is the name of the game. You have to think about several other aspects along with code complete, and we'll talk about them. Inside the product box, as much as we product managers sometimes like to call ourselves visionaries, our vision sometimes doesn't translate into the immediate view of how we can take our product and work with partners, if you will, or work with external parties to extend the scope and the impact of a product. We're often limited by this view of my product has this functionality today, this is my roadmap, this is when things are coming out. And we don't fully leverage, there's a huge ecosystem of partners and service providers out there that we can leverage to really think outside the box and improve our product scope. So what does this really impact? You know, some of these I already talked about. When you have a very myopic view of products, your sales and strategies impact. You don't really connect to the dots very well with the product. You don't think about, you know, from a vision perspective, you don't think about this, you know, 3-horizon framework as McKinsey has it, you know, and in the 3-horizon framework, you need to constantly be looking at what's in your, you know, 3rd horizon and shifting it to 2nd horizon and then to the 2nd into the 1st. And, you know, your 1st should be where you're immediately working on, but your 2nd horizon, the midterm should have a significant chunk, if you will, of the, a significant chunk of what you want to do in the coming months, if you will. Adoption and net promoter scores impacted. I still see net promoter scores that are in 20s when I've talked with several of my peers across the industry, and that is simply not acceptable. If we're building products that have net promoter scores in the 20s and 30s, there's a lot that we are not doing. And then for our customers, and I can tell you that most of the times that when I see net promoter scores being that low, there's typically 3 key factors. One, we haven't given the market a clear view of what we are about, of what we are going to be about. 2, we haven't given a clear, we haven't focused on customer adoption. And 3, we haven't adequately supported our customers. So again, that's the second piece. I've talked about the clear vision to the market. I've talked about customer adoption. I won't go there. And then I've talked about product scope. So as I saw these kind of set of issues, and I saw them systemic again, you know, company after company, and not just the companies that I'm talking about in my experience, but across the board with peers, my peers, I've seen this company after company. I built this framework, which is, again, as I said, 5-point integration framework across the organization. So let me go ahead and jump into it and talk about what those 5 points are. From a product perspective, I believe product kind of sits at that hub, if you will. It's the voice of the user, the consumer, whether that be your B2B customer or a B2C customer. And you integrate, you have to integrate, you know, to be a great product manager. You have to integrate across 5 key areas. Sales. As you think about sales, you're thinking about, you know, you have to, as a product leader, you have to think about commercialization, not just product features, but commercialization. How do I go to market? What's going to be my acquisition strategy working with the sales team? My retention strategy? What's my enablement? How does product fit into this? And this is across your field sales as well as your partners. And partners can be resellers, ISVs, or service partners. Engineering. How do I continuously improve my release velocity, but quality as well? How do I think about requirements? How do I think about prioritizations? What's my prioritization, you know, approach, my framework? That has to be continuously refined as well. So typically, this is where you're working with the engineering teams, the QA teams, and release management teams. When I think about marketing, this is, again, an area that product managers sometimes step back and say, I'm more product builder. I'm not a marketing person. And that's the biggest fallacy out there, is I'm not a marketing person. You are in the business of building a product that needs to be sold, that needs to be adopted. While you may not be exactly fully a marketing genius, if you will, but you have to be integrated with the product marketing and the marketing teams. You have to think about the community that you are targeting. What's your target audience? So this is where you need to start thinking about, and the community needs to be a broader definition than just purely customers. You have to think about your customers. You have to think about the partners that you work with. And if you are in B2B software, you have to think about the analyst relations, such as Forrester, Gartner, Ventana, 451. You have to start thinking about these in a more methodical and programmatic manner. Customers. Again, the goal here is making sure you have customer discovery and insights. How do you do a roadmap? How do you communicate the roadmap to your customers, and the prioritization? So again, key thing here is both customers as well as prospects. And finally, support. This is where you start thinking about, if you see here, I didn't say support as in customer support. You have to shift the mindset from being a pure reactive, purely, software feature driven. You have to think about the service that you're providing. You have to think about the service excellence piece of it. More and more, especially with software that's delivered in the cloud, whether that be SaaS or PaaS or IaaS, you have to think about the underlying infrastructure. You have to think about the underlying instrumentation, the monitoring, and that needs to be thought through from a service excellence perspective. And how do you enable the support teams? We'll talk about this more in the coming slides. So I'm going to take each one of these slice by slice, if you will, and deep dive. And specifically what I'm going to talk about are, for each one of them, is what are the key bullets that I think of as in my integration framework when I am developing products, and especially with regards to those integration points. And what are some of the key focus areas I recommend that you look at and think about proactively? So let's start with sales.
Hey, Satnam, sorry to interrupt you, but as you suggested, we do have some polls. So quick reminder on that. Whenever you want to launch, I'll launch the polls, Zoom polls for the audience.
Okay, sounds good. Let's do that towards the end, because that's sure. A good way for the audience for us to get some feedback from the audience.
Great.
Thanks, Gemma. Thank you. On the sales piece, the key thing that from a product leader perspective is while you're building your product from let's say, from the backlog prioritization or backlog management, you're looking at the features that the market really needs in your customers. You have to also think about the go-to-market strategy. Who's my target personas? How do I work with the field sales? How do I work with my partners? What programs? And if you are in a large, organization, whether that be a Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 organization, and you have a central partner management team or a partner network team, you have to start working with them in terms of the ability to understand what are the programs for partners, what programs need to be built, and how do you integrate into those programs. You may have people such as alliances and channels you have in larger organizations. You have to figure out how to integrate with those teams and with those programs, so you can really drive a lot of value from a go-to-market strategy perspective and value proposition perspective as well. Now, this is areas when you think about strategy, this is where you think across the funnel, if you will. So you're thinking about thought leadership marketing at the top of the funnel. The middle of the funnel, you're thinking about how do I drive my business with the sales pipeline that I have? What's happening within that sales pipeline? What are my losses? What are my wins? What did I understand from them? And then bottom of the funnel, once you close the deal and you have ongoing consumption, how do you drive customer satisfaction and success into that bottom of the funnel? So this is where, again, very close integration with field sales and partners is needed. 3 key focus areas that I suggest here. One is enablement and communication, and I'll talk about that. And this is enablement for the sales and the partners to make sure that they understand fully what the product is about, what the roadmap is going to be about, so they can communicate effectively to the market. Programmatic business review, as well as joint execution plans. I already talked a little bit about the joint execution plans. So what are some of the key areas? As I said, build a clear go-to-market strategy. So this is where, you may have multiple products and you have to think, where exactly does each product lie in the iteration, in the scheme of things? Where is one product could be at an MVP stage, the other product could have a later product iteration, it's on the 6th or 7th release, if you will, or the third product is, has been in the market for, let's say 5-10 years. You have to think about a continuous go-to-market strategy evolution with the field sales and partners. This is where they can provide you a lot of insight as to what they're hearing from the market. Establish programmatic workflows. This is something you have to think about very carefully, is how do I get more information and how do I spread the word? How do I drive organically the conversation that needs to happen with the partners, within the partners, as well as with the partners, as well as the field sales teams? So I would recommend thinking about, newsletters, internal as well as external newsletters. I would think about establishing advisory councils. This is internal advisory councils as well as partner advisory councils. This is where you bring to bear from an internal advisory council, you bring your best salespeople on these advisory councils and understand what's working, and then you double down on it and share that in the newsletters. You think about battle cards, you think about pitch decks. You have to make sure that there's a constant programmatic workflow. You need to establish a recurring data-driven business reviews. Many organizations I see still today, especially where product is not involved, is a very methodical integration and exercise around win-loss analysis, truly deep diving into win-loss analysis, or product having a clear insight into sales pipeline. What is my pipeline for the next quarter? Where exactly is the success in that pipeline? What are my consumption trends? More and more, especially from a cloud perspective, product needs to be integrated and understand the commercial aspects of the business. And then building joint execution plans across the funnel. As I mentioned, just think through the marketing funnel. Top of the funnel is your demand generation. This is marketing. You're going out there and you're talking about it. Your middle portion is your go-to-market. How do you develop the pipeline, as well as the win-loss analysis. And your bottom is really that customer success and case study, so you can talk more about the impact that the products have had. Now, I see there are some questions potentially maybe coming up in the chat. We'll address them. I see Bhagirika, great question. We'll come to that in a few minutes. We'll address them towards the end. On the engineering aspect, I won't read all of it, but there's one thing if I can drive for you is focus on the predictability. There are still many companies that will shift the release date. If there is one thing that I would say, if you have to balance between predictability and what the release is going to have, go on the predictability. Your customers need to make sure, of course, if you can get both, great, but your customers have workflows that are tied with your releases. So make sure that at least the releases are predictable. The releases predictability also helps you kind of create this very strong feedback loop and momentum with the engineering team. Once you focus on predictability, everybody understands there's a culture that develops around it. And people know that the release is going to go out no matter what. If we have to pull things away, we're going to pull things away. Well, the date that we have in our schedule, that's the date that we're going to go release. And you will see slowly that culture starting to emerge, where you will not only get predictability, you'll also get quality, and you will also get full feature functionality that you were actually looking for in your release. So predictability is definitely in the name of the game. The other piece that with engineering, I would say, is we need to drive more and more this need for product instrumentation. And this is more so in B2B products and less B2C products. B2C products, naturally come with other, tools out there that can actually, that can help you drive, if you will, that product instrumentation. But in a B2B product where you have your own custom stack that you're building on top of, the product instrumentation to gain user insight sometimes takes a backseat, if you will. But that should not be the case. More and more, you need to have insights into what your users are doing, when they were doing it, understanding your user behavior by cohort. So you need to make sure that you have product instrumentation. The key three focus areas in working with engineering teams, I would say, is first of all, product planning and release management. This is a no-brainer. I'm sure all of you have live and breathe this on a day-to-day basis. Instrumentation, as I talked about. And then the third piece is data availability from the data that's being gathered, and automation of the insights from the data that's being gathered. So let's just jump into it. Release predictability. As I said, how do you really create release predictability? One way is I've seen, and I continuously still see today, is that the product planning cycle is very tightly integrated into the release management cycle. And so what that does is it makes it difficult to kind of tease apart and abstract, if you will, the product planning from the development and release management. And when you don't have a clear demarcation as to when kind of the release handoff happens, to the engineering team, you start creating this dependencies that limit you from the ability to have a clearly defined release timeline or a release schedule, if you will. So more and more, I would highly recommend think about your product planning cycle, think about how code development comes in, think about how release management comes in, and try to separate the two so that your product planning can continue for the next iteration, for the next release, while code development and release management is still underway for the immediate release that's about to happen. Product quality, no-brainer. The key again here is working with engineering, working with QA, working with release management to make sure that there's a clear alignment on each release candidate. What are the thresholds? What are the gates that need to be met for the release candidate to go from one stage to the next stage? And what is that feature prioritization? And this is where, when I say feature prioritization here, what I mean by that is, remember I talked about predictability is the name of the game. So if you have to drop certain features, you need to make sure that that's very well understood between you, between the release, between the engineering team and the QA teams, very clearly. Achieve greater insights into users. This is, again, as I mentioned earlier, drive home the key point of that you absolutely need instrumentation for deeper user insights. If not in potentially every release, but at least 3 to 4 times a year, you have a big bang and you get additional insights into your users, in user behavior. Integrate embedded contextual help. So this is one area that's slowly starting to gather steam more and more so, which is, especially for B2B products, is how do you really enable your users to get the most out of your product? And the way you have to do that is to make sure that they can utilize the product, the enablement is there, and help is placed where it is needed. So as the users are going through utilizing the product, you integrate the help right there, contextually provide that as to where they are in the workflow for your product. It sounds very trivial, but this is a very non-trivial exercise. You have to think about it from a design perspective, from an engineering perspective, from a product performance perspective. But this one area, working with engineering team, is going to pay significant dividends for your product adoption, for your product support, and for your net promoter score. Let's jump into marketing. One of the things that I see still today is that product is thinking from a certain way of the persona that they're targeting in the market, and product marketing or marketing is taking a different view. So, for example, product is thinking more from a feature and benefit perspective or feature alignment, and it's thinking about who the audience is. While marketing is potentially taking an industry view, if you will, or a line of business view, and that sometimes that dissonance causes, in the worst case, a completely conflicting set of messages in the market. But even when it's not conflicting, it causes certain dissonance because what the product marketing team or the marketing team is putting out there in the market doesn't align one-on-one with what product team is talking about. So make sure that you avoid significant dissonance between those two teams. Make sure that you align as to how product is thinking about it and how marketing is thinking about it from a perspective of the value proposition. So this is where you have to establish the value proposition and the related messaging between product and marketing. 3 key areas to focus here and to get the benefit here of the marketing teams is areas around customer discovery and validation, messaging alignment, as well as programmatic experimentation. And that third one is crucial. What do I mean by this? So when you work, one of the areas that you should be working with the marketing team is on the messaging and cadence. And what I mean by that is as you think about, what are the key areas of activities that needs to happen, the messaging that needs to go out, you need to think about in the context of the launch type. And when I say launch type, I mean, is this a minor launch? Is this another dot release? Or is this a major launch? This is, a significant product release where we have to think about a different set of activities. You need to build that working with the marketing team in a very programmatic manner and figure out where exactly this product gets inserted and the product teams get inserted into those. When I say stage of the launch, I mean, are you in an MVP stage? Are you in controlled or limited availability? Are you in general availability? This is, again, these three different stages, if you will, as examples, will carry three different types in a different set of activities for each one of them. And so you need to make sure that you work with the marketing teams in terms of a very programmatic fashion of, here is my launch type, major or minor, and here's my stage of launch, minimum viable product, controlled availability, and general availability, and what are the set of activities that are going to happen, and where exactly is product going to be integrated in those set of activities. When you think about messaging and value proposition, this is not a set in stone once and forget about it. The market is changing for you. There's competition out there. There's technological innovation out there. The way in which software works today is not these monoliths, if you will, but more integration frameworks. So you have integration, if you will. So you have to think about the constant change that's happening in the workflow for your customers. And you have to constantly think about the messaging that's going to resonate with your customers, with your potential customers at any given point in time. So you have to work with marketing to invest significantly, whether that be A/B testing or multivariate testing in your own, such as your website or your microsites that you have, as well as paid media. So you can continuously keep your pulse as to what your customers are really telling you, to which messaging and value proposition they resonate, that resonates with them the most. And this links to the customer discovery of insight. With marketing, you have to, while you may have, and we'll talk about that actually in the next section around customers, while you may have significant number of direct customer insights and connection points, you have to create a programmatic loop between product and the marketing teams, because this is where new customer, this is a great feedback loop, because you will discover new customer insights. You may build new features on top of it. You will work with marketing to make sure that that's effectively communicated to the market. You will get some feedback on it, and that loop continues. And that's a loop that's, again, going to have significant dividends for you as you build that. My favorite topic, customers, because there is no product without customers. Not that the other three topics and the one that I'm going to talk about, support, aren't near and dear to my heart, but I think no product ever is successful without customers. And I may sound cliche, and I may sound like, hey, this is so trivial, but believe it or not, as trivial as it sounds, I still see people building products in a vacuum. There is no limit in my mind to the number of customer conversations you can have, whether that be existing or potential customers. So one thing I constantly talk about from an external perspective is talk and talk. And if you think you're done talking, go back and talk some more with your customers. Find customers across different cohorts of your product. Those that are currently in the MVP or in later iterations. Find customers across different industries. Find customers across customer contacts across different functional groups within your customer organizations. Look at, I would highly recommend, think about like 3 or 5 key dimensions, if you will, here from your customer perspective, as to what are those 3 to 5 functional, geography, product type, product, stage, and make sure you have sufficient volume of insights that you gather from your customers. And I'll talk about how to really talk, have those conversations with the customers. Along with talking, listen, but at the same time, make sure you're actually involved in making sure your customers are successful. So make sure you enable them with the information, with the tools that they can succeed within their organization with your product. So key focus areas here, again, communication, enablement and training of your customers, and advocacy. And I'm not talking about customers advocating for you, you advocating for your customers. And let me make sure I describe what I mean by that. So the first thing is drive increased opportunities for customer feedback. Establish methodical programs. If you don't have them today, establish them. Customer advisory councils, I've seen a lot, but what I generally see in customer advisory councils is sometimes the product leader will come, talk about the roadmap, talk about, if it's a 1-hour customer advisory council, 40 minutes are spent in simply talking about, the product. No, stay true to the word advisory council. You should come up with 2 or 3 questions and let your conversation be the majority of the discussion. So establish these programs. Think about your top 100 customers. Get variety, as I said, quality and quantity of feedback. Customer training and enablement. You've got Udemy. You've got other resources out there. You've got LinkedIn Learning. Put these trainings and workshops in as many touch points as possible, so your customers are enabled to be able to use the product effectively. And as I said, win advocacy by being advocates. This is so critical. This is, in my mind, a complete shift in the mindset. Today, we look at our customers and we ask for things. No, we need to ask and provide. My biggest success metric with a product is if the people who are using my product get promoted as a result of using my product, because they found some insight. And of course, granted, that's coming from a data and analytics perspective, but if they found some insight, if they found some value in the product, and they were able to use that value to drive better decision support for their organization, and as a result of that better decision support and insight, they actually delivered some key insights that helped their organization achieve better profitability. That's exactly what I want. That's what I want. That's how I drive more advocates, by being an advocate for my customers externally as well. And finally, support. My brethren in support are often forgotten by product teams. And I may sound like I'm being a little over the top emotional here, but I truly mean this. We often kind of turn a blind eye to the support teams, and believe me, that's such a treasure box of insights that it pains me to see that people do that. I highly recommend establishing structured information sharing guidelines, proactive reviews, and the 3 key areas that I suggest here are incident management and communication, enablement, metrics, and analysis. And let's go deep dive. And in the interest of time, I want to leave at least 15 minutes for Q&A and a poll as well. Define clear escalation integration workflows. Now, your support team may already have these, and good support teams, and more often than not, will have that. Clear escalation integration workflows. The point that you need to work on is, where do you integrate product into those? Where does product get to know about customer issues? Where exactly does product come into the discussion point for the communication? What exactly does the support team need in order to log those customer issues, in order to establish thematic planning, if you will, across the customer issues? So you need to think about the escalation integration workflow as well as communication. So across, whether that be planned or unplanned product-related communication, product needs to be integrated into those cycles when that is happening. And finally, this is one that I would say make this as part of your release planning cycle. No release is complete until you have until you have enabled, you've trained your product teams with the engineering teams for the next product release cycle. So make sure that support training and enablement is a key part, is a absolute necessary part, if you will, of your release planning cycle. So let me summarize this again. 5 key areas. If you want to take anything from this, you can take this one slide. Those 5 key areas across sales, engineering, marketing, customers, and support. If you establish a clear go-to-market strategy, you focus on predictability and quality, you align the personas and structures for marketing. Customers interview more early and often, and make sure they're set up for success. And in support, understand those escalation paths and insert yourself into the communication workflows. So with that, I'll stop here. Let's see. It seems like we've got a few questions here.
Thank you for delivering a brilliant session, Satnam. Really great insights.
You're too kind.
And yes, we do have a few questions lined up for you already. So let's begin with the Q&A. Give me a moment to share my screen. Could I stop sharing your screen, Satnam?
Oh, sorry, my apologies. Go ahead, Shema.
Okay. So audience, please go ahead and ask your questions in Zoom Q&A window or on the LinkedIn thread, and I'll direct them to Satnam. So Satnam, let's take the, right.
Yeah. I was going to pick up one question, which is around from Rohit. He said, in larger product companies such as Expedia, a product manager may be looking at a small portion of the overall product. She may be following this framework and doing a great job for her sub-product, but overall the product is not doing that well. What should she do next? So Rohit, if you go back to one of the things I talked about is that customer integration and partner integration. You actually, let me step back. You actually hit on something which is a pet peeve of mine. And when I say pet peeve, you actually hit on a very important point. I want to rename product management to workflow management. What I mean by that is I fundamentally believe that as we think about a product, more so in the cloud world, any particular product is a combination of is a cog in the broader machine. So to your point about, the product manager, she's got her product working really well. She needs to step back and look at the workflow of where exactly her product sits in the broader scheme of things. And as she starts looking at that, what she will find is, both upstream and downstream, and there are areas where whether that be the interface points to her product, whether that be interface points downstream to what she is delivering, there are opportunities that are out there. And so this is where she develops that list, if you will, of what are opportunities to her go-to-market, what are the opportunities from a product enhancement perspective, both upstream and downstream. So she needs to constantly expand the viewpoint of where exactly her product fits into the grand scheme of things. I think that's what my suggestion would be. Start building that, start working on that, and you'll start seeing that this is a typical land and expand. You will work on one product and you'll start expanding across to the other products as well. So hopefully, Rohit, that answers your question. If not, just feel free to respond and ask for clarification. Shivraj, how can engineering and support take the feedback from customers for feature enhancements in the product? So this is where, Shivraj, actually the integration point comes in with product. I see product as the voice of the customer, right? And it's product's role and responsibility to make sure, let me make sure I understand your question correctly. In fact, because there may be two ways. So let's say you're talking about engineering and support potentially getting direct feedback and piping that, if you will, or channeling that to the product team. So this is where you have to establish those integration points with the engineering. Some of these are pretty straightforward. Hey, how do I make sure that I establish, customer connect forums? So there are open forums where engineering is having a conversation with or support is having a conversation with the customers in terms of product, but also your internal workflows is, do you have proper internal workflows that will go from a bug to a Jira and into the backlog? So that's something you have to think about as well. Typically, what I would say is organizations have service tickets and bug filing processes well defined, but what's lacking there is a bit of a template as to what exactly is the benefit for the customer. What exactly is the customer doing today as an alternative for the feature that doesn't exist in the product today? So you just have to make sure that you think through a clear templatized version, if you will, of what are the key data points you need to gather for any feature enhancements. Shivraj, go ahead and clarify your question, because I'm not sure if you're talking about support and engineering getting directly that feedback, or product getting that feedback and getting product getting the understanding from customers and then sharing that feedback with engineering support. If you can clarify that for me, that'd be great. Arun, how to decide which product instrumentation to focus on? So far, there is no instrumentation in my product. So you kind of asked a product prioritization question in a roundabout way. Think about the instrumentation. So think about you can go about it two ways. So you can think about either, hey, I'm going to look at my 3 to 5 key workflows, right? If I look back at my product, there are 3 to 5 key workflows that, when improved, if I have greater insight into those workflows, I can make the biggest impact, if you will, in my product experience and impact for my customers. So as you think about those 3 to 5 key workflows, you think about what are the key data points you need to gather to improve those workflows. And then you start stack ranking them in terms of which one of these will go across, if you will. So if there's a data point that you can gather that will give you the widest view, the broadest view, if you will, across that workflow, go with that first. So essentially, this is what you do in those 3 to 5 key workflows. You say, which one's going to give me the most insight? Then the second one that's going to give me the most insights, and you kind of build a greedy algorithm, if you will, a hierarchy. And that's how you go about it in terms of building that instrumentation. Bhagirath, can you suggest some efficient ways of coming up with go-to-market strategies for B2B products specifically? Bhagirath, that's you and I will need to connect on LinkedIn. That's a very broad question. But what I say is, in terms of the go-to-market strategy, you need to first make sure that you have a clear vision for your product to communicate it to the market. You think through the competitive aspects of what you're communicating to the market, and how does that align. I would say, again, 2 areas where I would say is work with your customers, work with your partners, and marketing especially, to think through what are the key value propositions and what are the channels through which you're going to reach potential customers. My apologies, Bhagirath, that's a great question, but it's a very broad question. You and I should take that offline. As a product manager, okay, so Shivraj said, as a product manager, getting the feedback from support and passing on to engineering teams. Yes, so the way to do that then is, as a product manager, first and foremost, you need to establish some kind of regular reviews, support reviews with your support teams to be able to, so you can take multiple different data points you're getting and build them into teams. And when you work with your engineering teams, you essentially are presenting the user story to them, the user perspective to them that you gathered from the support side. But at the same time, you are translating that to the best extent possible into where, from a feature and functionality perspective, what is it that you're looking for? So that's the way to really take what support is telling you, build them into teams, and build them into the connection points for the feature and functionality. Okay, let's see, Tarun, and then maybe we'll get one more question here because we want to, before we jump into a poll, and then after the poll, we can take one more question after that. Tarun, let's try your question. In the middle of ideation and rollout stages of a product, there's a lot of vaporware generated by the on-ground sales and marketing team that many times tend to derail the roadmap or even the product baseline. Many times managers are asked to expedite beyond their control. How do you recommend product managers to not be rigid, but still ensure that unbaked cookies do not leave the bakery in the name of becoming the pioneers? Discipline. You need to have this. So this is where this is not going to happen overnight. This is exactly where you need to have that integration point with the sales teams and with the with the marketing teams as well. There's a framework that I use, Tarun, and hopefully this helps you, which is I have a 3-vector prioritization framework when it comes to product prioritization. And an organization needs discipline because any framework will fail if the organization doesn't have discipline to implement it and use it effectively. So the first and foremost is, when I think about a prioritization framework, is I think customer needs. Like, how many customers have talked about this? And that to me is my first vector of the prioritization. The second piece is, I say, sales. To your point about that sales and marketing piece, I ask for very specific data-driven insights. I want to know, okay, sales, if you're telling me that this is something I should prioritize, build a use case for me. Tell me how to build a business case for me. Is this a $10 million problem? Is it a $1 million problem? Is it a $100,000 problem? And by getting into that data-driven business case, you can start showcasing where exactly you can understand for your benefit, where exactly you need to prioritize certain features. And if you are continuously seeing that vaporware being generated, you can point to that as to the fact that each business use case, over a course of, let's say, 6 months, did not work out to be true. So then you can go back and work with the sales teams to review the underlying assumptions that they made, give them the benefit of doubt, review the underlying assumptions that they made. Perhaps this is a lack of the data that they have. This is a lack of the insights that they have, or the fact is that they are targeting a broader market than what your product is really meant to be about. But again, customer needs, sales and strategy, and then my third piece of my prioritization framework is pure clearing out the tech debt, if you will, right? So that's my third piece. But again, Tarun, focus on that. Start working with your sales teams to build business cases, hold their feet to the fire with regards to business case, but hold their feet in the sense of let them know that you're here to help them, that you're building these use cases because ultimately you want to understand and improve the methodology and the data points that you use in order to build those the revenue-based business use cases. Okay.
All right. So it says sales. What do you have to say about
Perfect.
that, Satnam?
So yeah, that's understandable. I've seen this time and time again that we as product leaders do not think commercial often. And sometimes, to Satya's question, let me take this actually in the context of what Satya asked, which is, hey, what is the role of the CEO? And Satya, I understand where you're coming from, but I would say this is not just the role of the CEO. This is the role of the product leader. This is the role of this is both top down and bottoms up. So if I translate your question as to what is the role of the executive leadership team, I would say is to create that culture within the organization, such that when you're thinking about your product, you're not thinking about your product purely in the sense of purely features and functionality. You're thinking about your product in terms of the P&L, in terms of the go-to-market, in terms of sales. And you are both empowering the product teams as well as making sure this is part of their objectives, if you will, to think about the commercial aspect. So the role of the CEO is to really create that organizational culture, create those cross-functional. One thing you could potentially do as a CEO is create those cross-functional teams and execution reviews and business reviews, where you bring the different perspectives and the different data points together, if you will, to create that cross-functional insights. And that should be your role, definitely as an executive leader and as a CEO. Shama, I can work with you.
Sure, the audience can connect with you over LinkedIn, like you mentioned, or I could also forward the questions to you or over an email, and then we can.
Yes, that'd be great. If you could do that, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Sure.
Because I know sometimes LinkedIn can be a problem. Yeah, Shama, I'd love to stay on, but unfortunately, I do have.
Sure. Yes. Right. For the final and the best part of the session, which the audience is also looking forward to, please help us declare the champion of curiosity, the curious mind here. We have a lot of curious minds. Thank you, audience, for participating and being so enthusiastic. So we'll help Satnam pick the winner now.
Oh, great. Thank you for the pressure. So I would say, from my perspective, this is, I would say, Tarun's question. I think this is where, as you saw from the poll as well, right? That the sales question is the key one. The sales integration is the one that's lacking the most today. And I think his question around how do you really actually create that? And anytime somebody talks about baked goods, that's part of my, my week, but they kind of hit my nerve. But I would say that's a very important question because you really need to integrate with sales. You need to drive yourself and the sales team to data-driven understanding of what the addressable market is, what is the opportunity space, both short-term, mid-term, and long-term. And you need to build that both qualitatively as well as quantitatively. And in a lot of places, there's a lot of qualitative, but that needs to be backed by facts. And you need to drive yourself into a process so that you can validate your assumptions and test your assumptions about the data that you're gathering about the potential sales of your product, and you need to build that into a cycle, and that's very important. So I would mark that Tarun's question as the one that's the champion of curiosity. So congratulations, Tarun.
Congratulations, Tarun, on winning the free digital course. We'll get in touch with you shortly. And yes, in view of the time constraints, Satnam, thank you. And we have enjoyed having you with us here. It's been a complete pleasure. Please accept the certificate of appreciation from the Institute. So if you scan the QR code on the certificate, it will take you to a dedicated Hall of Fame page that we have created for you, along with the recording of the session.
Perfect. Shama, if you can email that to me, I would appreciate that.
Sure. Right, perfect. Definitely. So we are grateful for the time and effort you took. Yes. Thank you, Satnam.
My pleasure.
And it was a pleasure having you here. Right.
Perfect. Bye.
And audience, thank you for joining in. It was great interacting with you all. Do not forget to register for the webinar on 16th. And please fill out the feedback forms in the chat window that you will receive. It'll help us a great deal to improve our webinars and take in your suggestions. And with that note, I end tonight's session. Happy learning and stay skilled. Have a great night.